have one other request with the chat. Use it! I noticed there was a bunch of questions people had, like how do you make these things, these digital networking events, how do you make them? Well, you just do. I did an event yesterday with Creative Mornings. As a matter of habit and practice, that community just jumps on and says hello and where they're from.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add, you guys all know each other, you know, you're not like, we don't have a group of, 700 people like doing this session. So what I would suggest in a bigger group where you don't know everyone to jump on, and when you arrive in Zooms and things, like where you have the chat, say, hi, this is like my elevator pitch thing that for events and asking questions and all the rest of it. You say, hi, my name is, I am, whatever your business or title or whatever is, my question is, but I would just say, like, when you jump on these things, on these chats, jump in and say, hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm based in wherever, or, and when you ask a question, particularly in like other platforms where they have the private place to put the questions, like Crowdcast, like put your name and your title or your name and your job, like really short in the title, because then if there's a moderator, they have to say who you are. And if you can network with everyone. Anyway, with that PSA out of the way, Fergal, take it away.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you, Kelly. That was, I love the way we're getting schooled before we even started here. I was going to end our podcast, our meeting here with a couple of tips on how to make these things more effective, but we've obviously started it that way. But that's cool. Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining. My name's Fergal Kenny. I'm the original founder of Digital Irish, and today we're going to be talking about networking with Kelly Hoey. Right. So if you don't know Kelly, Kelly's the best-selling author of Build Your Dream Network. I'm now the proud owner of 2 copies because I left one in the city and I had to sort of catch up on it over the last week. But go out and check it out. We're going to give you a bunch of places where you can find Kelly in a minute. But Kelly's got a massively diverse career, right? And lots of accolades, right? One of the smartest women on Twitter, one of the most influential tech women on Twitter, one of the most well-connected people in the New York City startup scene. All of which Kelly didn't think would ever be assigned to her, right?
It's why I went to law school, Fergal, for that Twitter accolade.
Yes, exactly. Wasted education, right?
But my parents are so proud of that honor that I have received. Yeah.
Well, listen, let's start. I want to start just like more sort of big picture for a second, if that's cool with you. More sort of the context of just what's going on in the world. We can talk specifically about COVID-19 and remote, like during the course of this podcast, but more just want to talk about the sort of the groundwork around the future of work, where that's going, and career paths in general, and how they're sort of like, these days they're sort of becoming less linear, right? And you are an absolute case in point. So maybe, can you just give us a bit of, maybe your perspective on that and give people, if they haven't read the book, a bit of an understanding on your background and how you've transitioned multiple times in your career.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because I graduated from law school in 1991. I thought I would, have a very linear career path. Maybe I'd make a big detour and go over to an accounting firm or, a corporation. Crazy, right? But I sort of imagined, kind of the up the corporate ladder thing. Fortunately for me, I started my legal career in Canada, in Ontario. So I'm going to say, the British legal system is probably the same in Ireland as it is in the UK as in Canada, that kind of articling year, that mandatory mentorship, that you don't get admitted to the bar unless you have been trained and mentored. So that's sort of part of my foundation. Like, how are you bringing other people along to build, I'm going to say a profession, but you bring other people along and you work alongside other people so that you are, building your own, I'm going to say your own profession, your own career. Mm-hmm. then there was also, I mean, you know, I already said it, started my career in 91. I mean, what technology did we have in 1991? Voicemail? You know, a Palm Pilot maybe? Like, I don't, someone like go back in the archives, right? So, and lawyers having to bill by the hour, right? You're stuck behind your desk. You don't have a mobile phone. You don't have, you know, the internet in the sense that you could take your work home. You are stuck at your desk. You're using a computer like a word processor, and you're expected to build client relationships. So how do you do that when you're chained to your desk? And so all of a sudden for me, every single opportunity, every touch point you have, whether that's with, I want to say the guy in the mail room or your secretary, let me start dating myself, right? You know, every time you have to send a memo, every time you have to do, every touch point, every voicemail, everything becomes an opportunity to build a relationship. And that, to me, when you take networking into that perspective, it just unlocks massive potential. Because now you're freed from the confines of thinking, oh my God, I have to go to another cocktail party. Though right now, I would go to any freaking in-person cocktail party that I got an invitation for, I'm going to admit it. But let's think ahead. You can be much more intentional in your everyday actions. And then you can be much more intentional about how you choose to clutter up your calendar. When you're making smarter choices, when you're thinking about, all right, why am I doing this? Why does this relate to? How is it building relationships? And that's kind of like the overall framework. When I moved from Toronto to New York, I was still a lawyer, and I realized in 2001, 2002, I really wanted to make a career change. Just for the record, everyone, all my career changes, like, you know, out of law, you know, out of high school, out of university, out of law school, starting my, let me think, changing careers in 2001, 2002. Let me think, every single one of my career changes during some kind of chaos and economic upheaval. So there's my other expertise. But I realized in 2001, 2002, that what I had done is I had built a very narrow network. I had a fabulous network of lawyers, investment bankers doing a particular narrow area of investment banking. And so the other lesson in all of this is, yeah, you can do this intentionality in your day-to-day, but for the strength of your network, you have to diversify it. It's like absolutely essential. And so finding ways to realize the gaps in your network, and some of those gaps may be the people that you haven't talked to from 3 careers ago.
And in your case, it was probably a little bit of a filter bubble in that a lot of the people you were networking with were lifers in their chosen career path as well. So they didn't necessarily have a worldview outside of that career either, right?
Oh, I mean, I was working 18-hour days when, you know, in New York and all the rest of it. And all of a sudden I realized when I wanted to and I was not making a massive career change. This is when I wanted to move into law firm management. But I quickly realized that the jobs I was looking for in that field at the time were completely filled by a whisper network. So if I didn't build relationships with the people already in those jobs, I was never going to get that job. So I had to build a completely new network. And so after that point, I was like, forget this. From now on, everything is intentional in the sense of like intentionally diversifying. This is great. I've got to sit on this committee to build up my professional network. But if I'm going to do not-for-profit work, I don't want to look at the same faces. You know, if I'm going to go and do, you know, something else, all right, let me see, I've stopped practicing law. That's fine. I can stay in touch with all those investment bankers I used to work for, and I'm going to find a way to do it. Because just because I've shifted now doesn't mean 10 years later, you know, I might not shift back. So where can I put structures in place? If you've spent a lot of time with people, the amount of effort that you need to put in to make it kind of blow up and you know, kind of have all those goodwill and great feelings come back are very small. So yeah, when you've pulled all-nighters and eating ice cream bars with investment bankers, they still want to hear from you 15 years later. I can assure you that.
And I'm sure there's some people who listen to this, and obviously you've had a successful career writing, especially recently writing books and speaking, right? But many, I still think there's many people out there who think they're sort of immune to this, right? Where they sort of, they might be sitting in a legal position right now. They might think, this profession is going to continue on as is, and to infinity and beyond. But I touch on technologies that are completely disrupting those spaces, right?
Right.
Like
right. But also too, but you think of law, you think of accounting, you think of any of the consulting services, those are relationship based. Anyone who's pitched like a general counsel of a big corporation, right? Or every time you see a corporation changing like their general counsel, just use that as an example. The legal counsel is going to change because where did they grow up? Where are the relationships? Which is not to say, oh, they bring their friends. No, they bring the people they can trust. If you are, I want to say, there may be someone with a better technology. You probably, Fergal probably have seen this with people like, oh my God, I've pitched XYZ Corporation and they know our technology's better, but they won't buy it because they're using so-and-so. Yeah, because they're stuck on their relationships. So this is like, even the best salespeople know this is not about, hey, how I have a fancy pitch. This is about how do I build relationships? How do I build relationships? How do I get the other person what they need so that I get what I need?
So let's go to the core of the book for a second, right? Which is all about sort of like very much goal-oriented networking, right? Mm-hmm. Which can take many forms, right? When you were sort of thinking about that, when you were sort of starting out with this sort of like transition, I suppose, in your career, what forms was it taking for you? Was it long-term career? Was it job hunting specifically? Was it sales? Was it lead generation? What formats was it taking? And what were your goals, I suppose?
Yeah. No, I mean, some of this is like this sort of like the benefit of hindsight. Like I like to say, even though whatever happened before in my career, I'm having the career I want now. Yeah. But I'm doing it with the benefit of that hindsight, and I never thought, Fergal, that I was doing something differently. But for me, when I think about undertaking an activity, a project, like when you think about networking, everyone starts with the activity, the noun, the busy thing. Yeah. Should I go to this event? How should I send this email? Da, 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 da. And I'm just like, stop. What does this relate to? You gotta put it into a context. What's your overarching goal? What is it that you're trying to achieve? What's the need? And chunk it down if it's something really broad, like I need more customers. I want to change jobs. Like, I need more money. Okay, no, we all do. Let's break it down, people. Like really, like tighten it up. And then with each of those, think about who's the person, who's the community, who's the group that relates, like who could help you? Because we get things done with the help of other people. Not a tap, not a swipe, not a platform. We get things done with the help of other people. So who are the people? And it might be generally that you're kind of like, well, it would be people who do this, right? You think like the avatars that startups have to do with their like, their ideal customer persona kind of thing. Like who networking wise would be the right person? Now, in terms of thinking about your networking activity, the busy work, what's the right way to connect with that person? Right? Because we're all unique. We're all different. For somebody else, it may be inviting them for coffee. For somebody else, it might be a text. For somebody else, it might be, I don't know, fill in the blank. So that's the way so for me, kind of like thinking about networking and what I do and how I do it differently. If I had to really sum it up, it's that. Like if you're rushing off to do an activity and then you have it on your calendar and you're dreading it, I really do want you to step back and go, why did I think this was a good idea? And not in a, why did I think this was a good idea kind of sarcastic way, but what was your decision-making process to put that on your calendar? and walk yourself back from that, because you will make smarter choices. If you think about, right, all right, what am I trying to achieve? Who are the people? Who are the types of people? Well, oh my God, I could email Marianne. She would know about this. Hold on a minute here. Marianne's written a blog post on this, or she just tweeted about it. Let me read that first, and then let me ask her. Like, do that kind of process of thinking about things rather than being that chicken with your head cut off.
When we asked people some questions just before they joined here about what their primary goal of networking is, right? Some of it was quite tactical. It's either I'm looking to get a job, and you can totally understand that given the context now. Some of it's about sort of like lead gen. I'm in sales. How do I best connect, with my clients, right? Is that too myopic? I mean, certainly that could be one tactical track, right? But should you have like multiple paths and approaches, right, with a bigger strategy, right?
Yeah. I mean, getting a job is a great one, but what point in the job search are you? Are you at the information stage? Are you at the discovery stage? Are you at the feedback stage? I mean, at each of those stages, there could be a different person you want to talk to, right? Do you have a clarity of what it is that you're looking for? Because if you don't, you might want to go back and, kind of backtrack from where you're networking and think about, right, who could I talk to help me who in my network, or who do I know, or do I need to hire a coach who can help me with clarity on this? Because that clarity, like, think of this is the best way analogy. Think of this like playing darts. No one's aiming for the outer rings to win, right? To win, you're aiming for the bullseye. When you're talking to your network, when you're pursuing things, you want to, particularly jobs, you want to go for the bullseye. You want to be really specific. They can give you other solutions. So some of this, when you're thinking about, I'm looking for, like, oh, hey, I need to get some more customers. Okay, get specific about it. So you can start thinking, all right, who is this person? Where are they? Or who may know them? The specificity is also important because you can then just have those conversations with people and see what happens. And I say that because, and I use this example all the time, a friend of mine got his, like, literally he can do the direct line between the goal he was out for, which was joining a certain golf club, because he needed to join it. He needed certain people to, like, approve him as, becoming a member or put his application in, because he knew he had to be in there for business development. The linchpin, like the pivotal introduction to the person who was like his nominator, his personal trainer. So the willingness to say to people, like, this is the willingness to talk to other people and to listen to other people, but the willingness to say to someone, yeah, this is what I'm looking for, and being very specific. Because in this case, the personal trainer was like, yeah, that's interesting. Hold on a minute here. I think I've got another client who's a member of that club.
Okay. Stepping back for a second, right? I mean, what about, you alluded to it earlier on, right? But let's say it's, in that case, you may know the personal trainer, right? But let's say it's a cold.
No, I'm just, in that sense, I'm thinking your everyday activities.
Yeah.
Like, some of this, what I'm saying to people is, don't be afraid of, like, or stop this sort of habit of segmenting parts of your network as being useful or not useful. It is only useful if you decide you want to be part of it. And that means listening and sharing and helping all aspects of your network. Too many of us do not listen. We brush things off. Oh, you want to join a golf club? That's great. Super. Anyway, do 3 more crunches. Like, we could do that sort of thing, or we could lean in the right way. Lean in and say, tell me more. So that's part of what I'm saying in all this. Anyway, back to what you were asking, Virgo.
What I was asking was about more sort of the cold approach, right, and how not to make it cold, right? I mean, and especially with like an online approach. You talk in your book about almost a multifaceted way of sort of like following people, retweeting their articles, sort of like commenting on them way in advance almost of actually making that outreach. So,
right. I mean, that's the beauty of the digital world. We can all kind of be stalkers in the right way, right? There's so much information. You can watch and, like, before you jump in, watch and observe. Is someone writing blogs? Do they have a newsletter? Do they, like, what is it they want? I had this incident the other day talking to someone. They said, oh, we'll reach out to her. And I said, no, you subscribe to her newsletter. So with respect to a journalist, I said, she sends out a newsletter when she's a freelancer, when she needs sources. She is very specific in that newsletter what she wants.
Yeah.
Subscribe to the newsletter, give her what she wants. Bingo. Guess what? You have a friend for life, right? So some of this is like, watch and observe. You might see the pain point that someone else has, right? And they want to hear from you if you're pitching them cold and you see the pain point. The case study in the book, Jessica Peltz, now it relates to getting a job, but her formula works, I think, for, like, particularly if you're doing new business development. And Jessica was looking for, knew no one in the, sort of Mad Men ad agency world, was applying for jobs. She's like, okay, I know how the industry works. Hiring opportunities come around when a client account moves from one agency to another. So your own industry, how does it work? When do opportunities arise? Where is the real pain point? When are you a must-have versus a nice-to-have? So she would, this is back in like 2004, so she had to use the old paper ad age, and she had a notebook. And she would, like, watch client accounts where they moved, and then she customized every single outreach. And she, like, had 4 job offers, and this was like, post kind of 9/11 stuff when no one was hiring, because she could see, she knew the pain point, they'd have to staff up, and she, like, followed the client accounts. Beats, she may have sent out twice as many, she may have sent out half as many cover letters. Like, sometimes people think about it in that volume sense, Fergal, and I'm like, no. Sending out a few really well researched and focused, and really, so the other person goes, oh my God, you get my industry, you get my pain, you get me, I want to talk to you.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about etiquette and, like, okay, so you've got, let's say you get the meeting, you get the networking meeting with your, that's in line with your goal. Yeah, tell me a little bit about, just I suppose the follow-up path as well. We talked about the prep, right? But also the etiquette during the meeting, right? And maybe the power balance of a meeting, right? Or the perceived power balance of a meeting.
You know what, when I was sort of think of those things, well, are you thinking about it in business context, career context?
Let's use a career context, right? I'll be selfish because I'm in that space, right? But where I suppose perception-wise, right, you've got someone who's maybe got the power, the access to the jobs, right, and someone who's looking for the job, right? So there's that maybe a power imbalance, right? I mean, how do you go about that, from the perspective of the job seeker, right? And how do you do the follow-up so that so that it doesn't end in a dead end? Right.
I'm going to say the clarity of the purpose of why you're taking the meeting, right? Like, what's the question, or what's, I sort of always think of, like, what is it you want to know from this person, and asking them or talking to them about something specific versus something you could find an answer if you just simply Googled it, right? And we say honor and respect the way they want to conduct the meeting. Do they want a telephone call? Do they want a Zoom? Like, whatever time they give you, right? I think about the idea of saying, hey, thanks very much. This is what I wanted to talk to you about, in the time we have, and if you have other suggestions for me, I like to talk about them. There was a meeting I had, someone did this. They're like, here's my agenda for the meeting, but you let me know where you want to start, kind of thing. And that's kind of a good way to do it, because someone may say, yeah, I've looked at your resume and stuff, but here's what I think you should be doing, or here's what I think I'd like you to do. So some of this is like, here's what I had for you and what I wanted to talk about, but, you know, does this sound like a good place to start? You know, like that kind of thing. Like if you need to set a timer because they've given you 15 minutes so that you can say to them, hey, you know, we said 15 minutes, I want to honor your time. You know, if they want to run on for an hour and a half, God bless, let them, but don't let you be the driver of that. The whole power imbalance thing, I think that's one of the things that gets us so anxious about networking. I want you to kind of get over it. The way you get over it is by, you know, being respectful of someone's time, being, you know, kind of grateful, not in a groveling sense, but like grateful that someone has given you this information. Your sort of return favor to them is to thank them for all of that. Like that's just kind of common courtesy. And then exactly what you're talking about, Fergal, like the follow-up. Where do you, I don't know, maybe they suggested that you, okay, I'll use an example with my own literary agent. She said, before we send out your book proposal, I need you to. Well, when I filled in the blank on the thing I needed to do, I reached back out to her. When, you know, like if they suggested that you revise something on your resume, well, revise it and send it back to them. Or if you said, hey, you know, since our conversation, like those are the kinds of things you do to follow up. As that I like to say, master the art of sending an email that does not require the other person to do anything other than read it. Like, don't say like, hey, I did all these things.
Intro, even craft the intro for them to make their life easier.
Right. Well, in the sense that, like, say you met someone and they're like, this is great. You know, I'll keep you in mind for opportunities. Right. So that happened to me when I was making that career change. So I literally have to eat my own dog food daily. And I really did during that period. So there's a whole lot of people that I had met who would be like, I needed them to keep me top of mind when a job opened at another firm in attorney training and development. So I had to send a lot of emails that did not require the other person to do anything. So I would say, hey, since we talked, I signed up for this course. Since we talked, you know, one of the most instrumental people in the field, I actually did accost her at a conference of, you know, I would say professionals in the field while she was getting her coffee and before she was speaking. And I went up to her and said, I loved your book. I'm really interested in this part of it. I'm hoping over the course of the 2 days we'll have a chance to talk about it. You know, so it was like, I went in like sort of fully prepared. It was like, okay, she's speaking, right? Got my copy of my book, her book in my bag, the place on there I want to talk to her about, which was genuine. I did want to talk to her about it. So, you know, some of this stuff with the follow-up is like, you know, not asking someone else to do the work for you to benefit you. You do not have to give them another introduction. You do not have to recommend them for something. There might be something that you have that they want, but just simply honoring like your part of the bargain.
Yeah.
My job is to make the other person want to help me and to thank them for it, and then keep them advised on the progress, particularly if they make an introduction.
Yeah. I was also going to say, like, there's sometimes a presumption, especially when there's a power imbalance, that the more theoretically powerful person is getting nothing out of it. But oftentimes they are, right? They're getting, you know, they like doing this. They like helping people out. They like mentoring and developing people. Right.
I mean, Alison Levine, so for those folks who don't know Alison, she wrote the book Leadership on the Edge. It's all on leadership lessons learned from extreme environments. Alison belongs to a club that none of us will ever be a member of, unless you plan on climbing to the highest peak on every continent and skiing to the North and South Pole. Unless you're going to do all of those things, you will never be a member of this club. So Alison is a dear friend. So she's one of the interviews in the book. And I had to edit her answers on this particular, exactly on this point, Fergal, because if I didn't edit Allison's answers, my book was going to come in a brown paper wrapper with a parental warning. Busy, successful people just want to help. All they want is you to be hyper prepared and to follow up and let them know what happened. That's all they want. You know, they want to hear that you were successful. They want to know, like, oh, hey, yeah, you know, great, Fergal, let me introduce you to Marianne. Let me know how the meeting went. We want to know those things, and that's all we want.
Yeah. So maybe that's a good segue to, you know, I suppose, types of networking and the presumption that networking in a lot of people's minds is all about honcho networking, right?
Yeah.
Versus peer-to-peer networking, right? So can you talk a little bit about maybe the, you know, that perception and maybe the effectiveness of peer-to-peer networking?
Oh, peer networks are your most important network. Full stop. Your most important network. You know, the people who are going through life experiences who can give you something really relevant, as opposed to, you know, I'll just use it in my perspective from when I was, you know, in corporate environment, you know, some white dude, 30 years my senior, like what, you know, there is mentorship I could get in those situations, but how do you handle like something in the moment? That's what I had to get from my peers. And so build your peer networks. They've either, you know, lived something in the moment, or they've lived it so recently they can give you a much stronger and better answer than someone who, you know, hypothetically did it 20 or 30 years before. So, you know, there's that part of it. Your peers and the networks you should also be building are, I want to say, the ones that are more people with less experience and junior to you, because we don't know anymore. You know, our career paths are nonlinear, so our career opportunities are going to come from unusual places. So if you're not mentoring, if you're not managing your teams well, I would highly suggest and recommend fixing that immediately, because your next great opportunity may come from, you know, an intern. It may come from a junior person. You know, my ex, the people used to hire him for restructuring were like all the little, as he used to say, buck privates on Wall Street who, you know, he mentored through the analyst program. They all went off to private equity firms who had, you know, big portfolios that had companies with shitty management, and that's where he got his business from. And how did he get his business? Because my ex was the world's worst marketer, and perhaps with someone with like a platinum Rolodex, the world's worst networker. But he had been a phenomenal mentor.
It's amazing. I mean, just 10 years in recruiting, just like some of the junior people I dealt with early on, amazing what 10 years can do to their career, right? Or suddenly they're turning around and they're your clients, right?
Right, and they remember. People remember. We like think about like the code we get, like, you know, like our password reminder prompt, like question when you lose a password. You know, it doesn't say how much money did you make last year. Like, it doesn't say anything like that. It says, who was your favorite school teacher? We remember how people make us feel. So,
Yep.
So when you think about the like sending an email, or, you know, sending out an invoice or whatever, like even those little things, how do you make people feel?
Yeah, it's like in the recruiting world, like always be prepared for the back channel reference on you, right? And make sure it's always going to be a good one in every interaction.
Right. I mean, like I mentioned the Whisper network. I mean, there is that Whisper network. This is also those things you think about the importance of peer networks. Each of your peers has unique and different networks. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, if they don't, you need some more peers. So they have unique and different networks. They have unique and different mentors. You know, if those mentors are looking for someone, who are they going to turn? They're going to have the ear of the people they mentor, because there is a, you know, relationship of trust there. You think it, like, put this in the VC world context. Venture capitalists, yeah, they take deal flow from each other, but they keep them within their networks. The most powerful network to get into, to get the ear of a venture capitalist, is your fellow startup founders. And the number of startups I know who ignore their fellow founders, it's pathetic.
Let's talk about, I mean, sometimes when you talk like at least hypothetically about networking, it's like, person A, person B interacting, right? But in your book, you talk about being the host and being that person C, right? Who's introducing A and B together, is walking around the room, making sure everyone is looked after. Maybe expand on that a little for us, right? So.
Well, I always sort of think about, we always get so anxious when we walk into, back in the day, but also with Zooms, think about it, when you walk into networking events, right? We're like, oh my God, what am I going to say? And who am I going to meet? And da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, I don't know, why don't you just pretend it's your party? Why don't you worry about how other people feel? And all of a sudden, you don't give a shit about how you feel. You care about how other people feel. So, I mean, like today, anytime if you're going on to something and there's like the chat and no one's using it, I don't know, pretend you're the host. Yep. That like the Creative Mornings event yesterday, there was one person and she was just an attendee, right? She was like, if I said something that needed a link, she was finding the link and posting it for everybody. No one asked her to do it. I didn't ask her to do it beforehand. She just said, you know what, I can do this. Because people are like, oh, what was that? Where can I find the link? And she's like, I'm on it, people. I got it. Here's the link.
What was that book you named before, by the way, Kelly? Say it again, and no one posted that link, so maybe we'll.
Yeah. What was that?
What was the book you mentioned before? I didn't see that. Oh, Gavin.
So it's Allison Levine, Leadership on the Edge.
Got it. Okay. All right. Yeah, so I mean that's sort of like, it's about generosity as well, and even like you might be person C, but even if you're in an A/B sort of situation, you can. It's really important to be generous and not sort of think of this as a one-way affair, right?
Absolutely, but I think there's also this hits it. So I've always sort of assumed that, like, let's assume the host mentality. Because as soon as you start worrying about how other people feel, your own kind of anxiety or nerves, they kind of like fall aside. And if you end up in situations where an organization is not hosting in that kind of making sure that everyone's meeting people and new people are being brought in, you can decide whether or not you want to be part of that group, but you can also, this is sort of the beauty of digital, there's no rules with respect to how chat is used.
Yep.
And so there's no rules that say that you, other than being a decent human being and, old-fashioned rules of etiquette and not being a jerk. I mean, you wouldn't maybe you would run into a bar going, hey, everybody talk to me. But, think of digital in that same way. And all right, there's a bunch of people here. We want to have a conversation. How can I be helpful? How can I be of service? And enter within that mentality, and you will have much more people much more receptive to engaging with you.
So that maybe sort of is sort of like almost like a reactive host situation. Maybe you're crashing someone else's party and becoming their host, right? But what I think I've used to decent effect is actually running events. I mean, like Digital Irish was originally put on, so I could bring a bunch of people together that, shared the same sort of affinities, that were in technology, that it wasn't random going to an Irish event that was full of sort of like people who weren't necessarily in the tech space, right?
Right.
It was selfish in a way, right? But, but it also allows you to sort of like to filter what
and the little tasks associated with event, you may say, oh my God, thank God Fergal and Marianne and others have got energy to host events, because Lord knows I don't. But they need support with their events. Like, don't undervalue the power of those other roles. When you are in charge of attendee communications, when we have in-person events again, the power of handing out name tags, oh, that's a big one, because now you know everyone. Particularly when there's smaller niche events. Oh no, you don't put the name tags on the table for everyone to take. No. You hand those out one by one and introduce yourself to everybody. know, that's one of the stories in my book in terms of how Jennifer Johnson built an entirely new business network in an industry she hadn't been in a city she had lived in for 2 weeks. One lunch, 82 business leads, because she took the time to individually hand out the goddamn name tags. Yeah. Seems really simple, seems so obvious, but no one does it, or 99% of the population doesn't do it. Like, doing those, if you start doing the little things better, yeah, you're already ahead of the game.
Well, Gavin handed out the name tags today, but he gave about 50 people his name earlier on. It seems to have changed over the last couple of minutes. Let's talk, speaking of online, let's talk about online for a second, right? We're all in this new sort of like normal, everything's on Zoom, right? You already alluded to some of it. How do you sort of like take advantage, like how do you do a better job of online networking? And I suppose, how do you choose the events based on the tech that they're using so you can get the most out of it, right? But can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, obviously, you know, you've got chat rooms, breakout rooms, maybe you can...
Yeah. So some of this to me, when I think about Digital Fergal, and you know, I know Marianne knows this, she's heard me talk about it a million times. It's like, I don't think of them as any different, like in person and digital. I don't think of these things as different. They're not running parallel, they're doing this. And so whenever I step onto a digital platform, I think of the physical equivalent. So this to me, it would be the equivalent of like we were sitting, you know, side by side at the Irish consulate in New York, kind of missing their tea. They had good tea. Those scones were really kind of nice too. So, you know, like, but I think of it in that context. You and I having a chat, watching everybody here, you know, like they were sitting in the chairs in the rows, having a nod, whatever else, you know, waiting to ask a question. So think, and for your own mind with social platforms, where they relate in an interaction in your life. And when at the time of writing the book, for me, LinkedIn was, you know, kind of like putting on a suit and grabbing a briefcase. So the communications I had with my network and what I share and how I talk about what I'm doing is in that very much that kind of box and context of professional and business. They don't need to know about what I'm eating or what shoes I'm wearing. Okay? Then, you know, you sort of head over to Facebook, or, you know, Instagram to me is kind of a hybrid, but you know, when I was on Facebook, I sort of think about, well, I joined Facebook because of my family. So if I'm talking about my book being launched, you know, there's a context, you talk about it with your business friends or professional context. You can already sort of hear in your own mind, your own language around that. Versus if I was sitting around a dining room table with my family, how I would talk about my book being published. And then Twitter for me is the great cocktail party. Are you a good guest that other people want to talk to? And so for every time for me with digital, I need to, like, behind avatars are real people. And we want to have real conversations. So don't use this digital in this limited, stilted kind of like, oh, great. I mean, I'm sorry for people who are doing Zooms like literally all the time, because the energy level you have to exert, not just only sitting in a chair and staring at a screen, is quite incredible to get the same kind of interaction. But bring that, think of that, all right, I am going to be present and I'm going to be here by treating this like we're sitting in the consulate in New York on Park Avenue. We're having this event. Let's treat it as such. Let's deal with it as such, and then to get so much more out of it.
Practically speaking, the mechanisms for that, I mean, like, you know, when I'm on Zooms, I use like, I'll do private chats with people I haven't seen in a while, right, as the meeting is going on. I think the breakout rooms are phenomenal, right, on Zoom, like in terms of, and we should probably do one at the end of this call as well. Otherwise, it just ends up being a one-way, and we do want to facilitate the connections, right?
Right. But and part of your question, Fergal, like for me too, so the decision, like what choices do you make, that goes well before you're actually click, you know, before you've like clicked hit, like, you know, on the invitation to enter the Zoom and the decision on what breakout rooms. You've already made a a proactive decision. Why am I attending this event? What do I want to get out of it, and why do I want to get that out of it, and how do I want to serve and help other people in this? And every event we can have, so there's sort of those two layers to this. Every event we can have a different intention. It may be, what the heck's this Digital Irish thing? I want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Or it may be, oh, I really enjoyed the last event, and this event I want to get, you know, I had a great sidebar conversation with Gavin. I want to really chat with him more because he said something like we all, so how you actually, like, why are you attending? Because if you don't know why you're attending, all the other advice about how you can use Facebook or blah, all that kind of stuff, whatever. Why are you here? And like I said, look at your own calendar, audit your activities. You know, anything on your calendar that you were like, oh yeah, I didn't get much out of that one. Step back and say, why didn't I get out of it? Did I make a wrong choice, or was it a shitty event, or was it a poor organization to be involved with? So
Sure.
yeah, but that's where, and some of this might be, you might say, I'm just here to learn. I'm here to diversify my network. I'm here to, and that's great, do it. But also think about, when I think about digital, don't think of it as this separate thing. Oh, that's social stuff. Oh, that's just marketing. No, we're human beings. It's how we communicate, connect, engage, and build relationships today.
Yeah, and then you touched on something else I wanted to bring up, which is sort of like, you know, diversification of network, right? Of networks as well. You know, you talk in your book about, you know, not being too vulnerable, not making yourself vulnerable, but also getting out of your filter bubbles too. Right? I mean, and you know, this is even a case in point. I mean, I strongly encourage, if anyone is solely relying on Digital Irish as their networking group, you need to do a lot more than this, right? This is one angle, right? It's one angle for me, and it should be one angle for everyone else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at what's going on, big picture, right, with Black Lives Matter, and you think about, you know, just you know, other, like, getting exposure to other groups so you can learn more.
Right. Like I said, you never know where your next opportunity. You never know. Like, just full stop. It just adds such a lovely dimension to your life. I remember one weekend in particular, a number of years ago, walked out, like, you know, I had to keep this straight face after all these years in New York. When you go to someone's home at certain addresses in New York, and they say, oh yes, just go up to 17, and you're like, what apartment? And then you realize you're not supposed to say that because it's like the entire 17th floor kind of thing. Anyway, so I went to this very fancy party, met all sorts of, you know, bold-faced names, all this kind of stuff. Walked out, laughed my ass off thinking, I don't think anyone else on this party is walking 2 blocks to catch a bus down Fifth Avenue home. And then the next night I was at a walk up in Brooklyn for a potluck dinner with, you know, a bunch of friends with kids and, you know, like tech people, and what completely different worlds. And I just remember, I go back to that weekend because I was like, damn, that was a good weekend. And damn, that is really fun to have such crazy polar extremes in all manner of shape and form in my network.
Yeah. And it's amazing how welcome you are. I mean, like, you know, there's the side group we have, which is Digital Irish Angels, right? Which I run with David Beattie, who runs Gangels, which does LGBT investing, right? And, you know, I've gone along to a couple of their events, and you know, I'm hetero. You know, you would think, you know, it's not the natural place to go, but what a great group and a diverse group to, you know, to meet with and mix it up. You know,
right. Because otherwise we can get in an echo chamber, totally into an echo chamber. You know, like I think of my own upbringing in Victoria, British Columbia. That was very, you know, my mother's a teacher. My, you know, father's a veterinarian. It's not like, you know, they, you know, I'm gonna say highly educated, you know, several degrees at school. You'd think, oh no, their view of the world was like this and what was possible for me. And it wasn't until, you know, kind of getting out of that bubble that I could see bigger possibilities for myself. And then as my network has diversified, my network has seen things in me that I never imagined. You know, when I think about my, former boss who said to me back in like 2006, sorry. Yeah, 2006, Kelly, you need to tell people what you do with networking. I told him he was an idiot. And then, like 14 years later, I had to tell him he was right. So, so it's like, I never imagined writing a book, but my network saw that in me. I never imagined being the head of a global business network for women. I imagined that I would go and run an alumni program. What my crazy imagination. I'd be a lawyer, I'd be a manager in a law firm, and maybe I'd expand to being a manager in an accounting firm. Like, seriously, that was my viewpoint.
Yep.
Other things I'd imagined as a child doing, it was like, no, you can't do that. That's not a real job. Do this.
Right.
And so you need that diversity, because people will come to you and say, do you know, Joyce Sullivan, if you folks don't know Joyce Sullivan, she's phenomenal. I did a really great podcast interview with her on career reinvention. She lost her job during the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. And it was during outplacement. She's sort of describing things, and she's like, I'm a, kind of Wall Street type. And everyone in the group looked at her and they said, no, you're not an operational finance type. You're a marketer. And she's like, what? And then she's like, hold on. I have to listen to this. There's like 25 people in the room and 24 of them are telling me I'm a marketer. I have to listen to this. So that's the value of having a diverse network. Your family, your closest might be like, ooh, no, don't do anything scary. Don't rock the boat. No, you've put all that time in your law degree, Kelly. Ooh, all that kind of stuff. No, let other people tell you what you are. But make sure you got a diverse network, so you're actually hearing the chorus, not the, keep on the same track chorus.
So Kelly, I'm conscious of time. I want to maybe leave a little time for. We always at Digital Irish, we always ask people to come up with their ask, right? In your particular case, can you just tell people where to find you, both podcast, book, newsletter, and maybe someone generous is going to post the link. Let's see how many people.
Right. Okay. So my website's the best place. Everything's there.
Okay.
Up in the corner, you'll have the links to all the social. Podcast is on podcast by the same name as the book. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, or I guess Apple Podcasts, not iTunes. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podtail, Radio Public, all that kind of stuff. I also posted on my YouTube channel, and the link to that is on my website. Everything's there.
Okay, jkellyhoey.co, right?
Yep.
Okay, so follow that, guys. And if you, Kelly's obviously been very generous with their time here.
Because I got so many plans to go out. Woo! It's a full day.
So great. Well, let's do a couple of questions if that's cool with you, right? We got a couple that came in. Someone had a question just about internal networking. Maybe based on our conversation, you would assume it was only external, right? But maybe talk a little bit about that. Like, what's your advice for networking with new staff? That's from Melissa Young.
Oh my God! Like, I'm gonna say, are you a new staff, or are you worried about new staff?
Melissa, we'll unmute you.
Or chime in the chat with, just to clarify that, because yeah, I mean, internal networks are vital. I mean, when I was in the law firm, I was doing professional development and basically hit a dead end with my role in professional development. But over the sort of 4 years of doing that role, I had built relationships across the entire firm for a variety of reasons, mostly because I was given no staff and no budget. So you go and find people to help you a lot who have staff and budget when you have no staff and budget. So when word got out that I was either I needed either a role to be created in the firm for me, or I was leaving the firm. And this was totally in the open. It was my boss and I had talked about it. We had reorganized the department. Like, I came in with the plan. I'm like, here's what we should be doing, because we both know that, you know, I've hit the glass ceiling here. You know, the head of marketing came right through and said, you're not going anywhere. You're coming to work for me. I'm going to create this role. So that's what, you know, internal networks. So think about, you know, in your own function, you know, rather than, you know, I was in professional development, rather than getting pissed off with the finance guys, the people in benefits, or, you know, HR, because they're mucking things up with some aspect of your job. How do you build relationships with them? Right? Rather than firing off nasty emails, how do you pick up a call and say, yeah, let's talk about this. How can we, you know, all right, we both have a different touch point on how we're dealing with this aspect. Let's talk about it, because you never know. They're going to make your life easier, but it also may open up opportunities. So, you know, look, if your, you know, company, your firm does, you know, affinity groups, right? Like maybe you join, you know, like, oh, well, this, I'm naturally going to migrate to people who look like me. I don't necessarily, well, I can be in that affinity group, but I don't need to have a strong touch point in it. Maybe there's something else I can do. Lots of companies and firms have community projects. Why don't you do one with another group rather than the group that you work with day in and day out? So, you know, kind of leverage those things. Oh, and this is also where your peers come in handy, because they may have stronger mentoring relationships with the muckety mucks who are going to promote you.
There was a couple of questions just around networking as a way to sort of develop business, right? I mean, one person here asked, Jim is asking, primary goal in networking is to be able to get in front of IT decision makers to expand my book of business. I mean, obviously you gave a generic framework, right? But in his particular case, right? Maybe just give him a quick, you know, pointer.
Yeah. So these IT decision makers, like, you know, there is the element of like, what's their pain point? What like, who are they working with now? Like, are you solving something that their other providers can't? So there's some of that is that sales and industry and strategic stuff. But if you're also like, yeah, this is relationship based, and I need to get my foot in the door because, you know, at some point their sales gal or guy is going to leave, and then they're going to go to a better provider. Right. Well, where do these IT professionals hang out? Like, what are they doing? Like, thank God for LinkedIn and corporate bios. People put this information down. Is there an organization or group they belong to? Are they speaking at events like this that you could attend to? Like, if I was an IT guy or gal and I was, you know, doing a panel and someone's asking smart questions, it's like, you pay attention to that, you know, to follow up with them after they've done something, to sort of say, wow, that was a really interesting presentation. You made this comment and I really wanted to know, like, to reach out to someone like that. It's awesome. Like, so think about what are they doing? Where are they hanging out? Where are they giving? Where are they indicating what matters to them, so that you can find ways to connect with them?
Then maybe we'll take a question on the chat. Let's see, Pat, right? Pat Carroll says, what tips does Kelly have on capitalizing on the disruption?
Pat Carroll could be running a goddamn masterclass on this. I've seen you hiding up there in the corner, Pat.
Pat wants to capitalize on the COVID disruption, right? So how does he capitalize on it?
Pat, you got to be some context for that.
So how do you go ahead there, Pat? Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, there he goes.
It's not letting me unmute.
Pat, what are you talking about? No.
That sounds terrible, capitalizing on COVID disruption. No, I guess what I mean, Kelly, lovely to see you and lots of familiar faces. I guess I mean, besides doing all our normal social stuff, because we can't go to physical events, Zoom meetings all day, is there other stuff we should be doing digitally, or how can we pull it all together, or, you know, in the absence of the physical meetings?
Yeah. So I've been doing crazy things like sending snail mail. People are at home.
Yeah.
You know, like some of this is like, you got to go old school. You know, put yourself in the other person's shoes. You know, I remember initially when we thought this whole kind of self-isolation was going to last, you know, a couple of weeks. She says with laughter. And, you know, like there was like endless Zoom cocktail parties and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know about you, some of that I've seen sort of peter away. It's sort of like, right, what could we do for someone else that is thoughtful? And that could be just sending a note. It could be that kind of thing, or to be looking at it saying, right, if this now is something with an uncertain end date, how do we make it meaningful? How can I add value? I don't need to throw something else on somebody's calendar. And when I do it, how do I do it in a way that people say, oh my God, I need to come back and have more of that. So I think putting more thought, more empathy, more sort of understanding, you know, into what is going on, you know, with the other people. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly.
I'm so excited. My friends in Australia are sending me a package and I cannot wait. And they said they took the most controversial things out. So I'm a bit disappointed on that, but I'm so excited to see what they send. Like, you know, send a card. Oh, and by the way, for anyone in New York, Dwayne Reed, the Walgreens Dwayne Reed, when they have a card section, they have this one section of cards that are slightly warped. There's just something slightly odd and dark in the humor, and they're really fun to look at, giggle, and then send out to people.
So Kelly, we've got a question from Angus, right? He's just asking, again, this may be from the perspective of a host, right? Especially if you are hosting Zooms, right? We're lucky in Digital Irish, we've got Patrick McAndrew was teaching us how to do this, but he was very good sort of with breakout rooms, giving people distinct things to talk about, right? Yeah. But any particular tips around that on how to run breakout rooms effectively?
Well, I think one of the big things that you guys are doing this is, and people forget this, like, just because we have this technology that we can all log on to, like, people understaff online events. Let's just say that. They understaff them. And the idea, if you're going to host an online event, you need to think and staff them up customer experience like it was an in-person event. So to have someone watching, like the greeter at the door, welcoming people into the room, right? The person who is might be moderating and helping manage the chat and bring things to the moderator. Someone who says, right, you know, here we're either going to give instructions if it's going to be self-facilitated, or we're going to have a facilitator in each of the breakout rooms. For those of us who are like networking and creating opportunities, you know, like if Digital Irish said, we want to have a roster of people who will, you know, facilitate in breakout rooms. Do you want to be one? Well, there's great networking for you, because now you're the facilitator. You're getting as much out of it as what you're putting in. So I think that's one of the things that kind of take that step back. If you're part of one of these things where an organization hasn't taken that, I need to make this a human experience, not, oh, we've got technology, we can do this, push a button kind of thing, but we want to make this. So if you go with something and they don't do that, right? Well, no one's stopping you. Jump in and make the experience yours. You're already there, you want to get something value out of it, do it. It may affect whether or not you want to be part of that organization and their events in the future. But in the moment, if you're like, damn it, I want to get something out of this, just do it.
Right. So on that note, well, firstly, I just wanted to say, Kelly, thank you so much for your time. This has been fun to do. You're so engaging to have on these type of calls. I saw you 2 weeks ago with Terry Kawaja, and I was like, we got to do this. So thank you so much for doing this.
Talk about having to have energy, Terry Kawaja. Good Lord. Oh, and if people don't know Terry Kawaja, Luma Partners, LUMA, Luma Partners, they do some Terry has done an extraordinary webinar series. All the past ones are on YouTube, but if you're in the like digital marketing, ad tech space, like phenomenal insights.
Yeah, there's generosity just personified right there. So thank you for that. But you know, maybe we can just give Kelly a virtual clap. But thanks so much for your time here, Kelly.
Having me, Virgo, Marianne, Pat, everybody, Gavin, thank you, Louise. Lovely to meet you off Twitter.
All right, sounds good. We're going to the breakout rooms now. Thanks again, Kelly. All right, cheers.